For this project, you're going to need a piece of wood, a speed square, a pencil or marker, a ruler, a handsaw, and of course a vise or clamp to hold your workpiece down. First thing we're going to do is measure the piece of wood to the desired length. I'm making the word plantation, which is 10 letters, so I would like my piece of wood to be 2 inches longer so that I have room on each end of the piece of wood. I'll lock this piece of wood into the vise, securing it tightly, and using my index finger to guide my saw, I will start on the pull stroke and cut my block of wood off. Now that I've cut my block of wood, I'm going to use my ruler and a pencil to lay out a mark at each inch along the block. Each inch is the width of one of the letters that we're going to cut out on the scroll saw. Once I have those marks, I'll use my speed square to continue the line all the way across. These lines are used to indicate the width of each one of the letters on your project. The first and last space are not used. Those will be cut off later. Now, I'm carefully drawing the letters rather than writing them. When you draw an object, your brain processes the act of drawing differently than writing, and it's more deliberate. When you try to write a letter, it comes out a little sloppier sometimes than if you actually treat it as a drawing and you draw the letter. Now it's time to go to the scroll saw. This knob here tightens the top of the blade. This lever adjusts the tension of the blade. This big red button, that's the on-off switch. Underneath the table is another knob right here that you use to tighten the blade at the bottom. And this knob allows the table to tilt left and right. Up top is a knob for variable speed, so you can speed the blade up fast or slow. This is the material hold down foot, and it has an adjustment knob here to allow it to raise and lower depending on the thickness of your material. This foot should always be in place whenever you're working with the saw. This groove is where the blade inserts, and it goes through the table. As you can see here, this is the blade. It's very thin, and it has a direction to the teeth. You typically want the teeth pointed downward towards the work surface. This holds your material against the work surface when you are cutting. It prevents the material from bouncing around. Now, to install the blade in the saw, we want the teeth pointed down. Lift the arm of the saw and slide the blade through the opening in the table, aligning it with the blade clamp and tightening the blade clamp knob. We'll perform the same task underneath the table, aligning the blade with the blade clamp and tightening the blade clamp knob. once that's done, it's time to adjust the tension. So we'll reposition here so you can see the tension adjustment knob. The tension adjustment knob starts all the way over on the right, and it is a lever that you pull to the left to increase the tension of the blade. You need a certain amount of tension on the blade to keep a straight cut. This knob is the material hold down foot. You want the material hold down foot just above your material. It is to help prevent the material from bouncing around and also acts as a guide to keep your fingers from making contact with the blade. Now, the saw only cuts in one direction, the forward direction. If you try to push the material on the side of the blade, it does not cut. The back of the blade, it does not cut. It only cuts in one direction, and that is forward. So you have to plan to make all of your cuts in a straight line, as straight a line as possible. When you're cutting out your workpiece, when you need to change direction, you need to pivot the workpiece around the point of the blade. The blade only cuts in a straight line, so you do need to turn the workpiece so that where the blade is going up and down through the workpiece acts as a pivot point. You'll see that when I'm cutting out the different letters, the different sections, that I will stop the cut and turn the material in the cut. It does take some practice to get used to cutting out the different shapes and being able to turn and pivot the blade properly to get the desired cut. When cutting, allow the blade to do the work. Do not force the material into the blade. The blade will take its time and it will cut cleanly as long as you allow the blade to do the work. Don't force it. That's how accidents happen. Now that we've got the bulk of the material removed, it's time to cut the inside of the letters, the inside of the O, A, P, and so on. To do this, you drill a hole big enough for the saw blade to fit through in your block of wood. You then loosen the blade clamp, pass the blade through the hole in your block of wood, and re-secure the blade in the blade clamp. Retensioning the blade, as you did before. Hold your workpiece to the surface when you start the saw. This technique is used to remove the inside of letters or numbers. It could be other shapes where you have to cut the inside of your material out. It's very easy. Again, you want to let the blade do the work. Don't push it. Don't force the blade. That's how accidents happen. Whenever you reset the blade to make a cut that is inside an opening, make sure you are holding the material down to the table when you restart the saw. It prevents the material from jumping around. Once you've got all of those parts cut out and you're ready, you can cut off the waste ends on the left and right of your piece and make any final delicate cuts that need to be made. You want to save any delicate cuts where you may have weakness in the material for the very last cuts that you make. This way you don't break your project. Now that you've finished your project, there's one last thing to do. To clean up. Use a brush to remove any sawdust off the work surface. Release the tension from the saw blade. Get a broom. Sweep up the area around the tool that you were using. Do not leave any debris on the floor. Keep a clean job site, a clean workshop.